Welcome, everybody, to a special post-game edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton. We are here at MetLife Stadium in one of the coaches' booths here, and another tough one for the New York Giants today. Final score, the San Francisco 49ers 34, the New York Giants 24. In a legacy game, the Giants' recent legacy is about losing games and walking out of this stadium trying to figure out what the next step will be. What I wrote on NorthJersey.com, just finalized my column and published it, so it's out there if you have not seen it yet. Please do subscribe to NorthJersey.com, and I promise you it's worth it. We not only give you this podcast for free, but we are at every road game, we are at every game, we are at every practice, and we take a lot of pride in our coverage. So before I hear from a lot of you that say, why do we have to hit the paywall? Why can't we read your stories for free? Well, we do podcasts like this on the road after every game, after every home game, and Paul Wood and I try to do the best we can to bring you the best product you can regarding the Giants. So that's my pitch. If you like our coverage, please subscribe. It's not just watching the podcast, it's reading the stories, clicking on the links, subscribing, because it matters. It matters to my work. It matters to your coverage that you are all in. So if you're all in, please show us, because it's much appreciated. It's all about Jackson Dart. And I've said this several weeks, and yes, there are things that are going on right now as far as the organization and trying to figure out which direction they go, and everybody wants to know, will Brian Dable be back? Will Joe Schoen be back? Fire everybody. Fire Shane Bowen. Fire this one, that one. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? The bottom line here is that I walk out of here after 6 games with Jackson Dart as the starting quarterback, is that I believe the Giants are in the situation that they were in the 2004 season finale against the Cowboys, when the late Wellington Mara turned to his son John Mara in the stairwell at the old Giants Stadium and said, I think we have our guy. Think about it. It took Eli Manning until the final game of that season to make believers of the organization. Jackson Dart has done that in 6 starts. And I truly believe that. There's just a feeling with watching Jackson Dart and what he does here as quarterback on and off the field. Brian Dable said it after the game. Jackson Dart is the leader of our football team. Think about that. It's a rookie, 22 years old, and he's the leader of the team. I cannot begin to figure out what went wrong with this defense. I know everyone wants to blame Shane Bowen. The tackling at times is horrendous. But I think Jackson Dart said something after the game, and I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to read his quote because I think it does speak to what he said about the Giants and the franchise after they beat Philadelphia here, and they beat the Eagles that Thursday night. And the Giants were out here celebrating and feeling really good about themselves that they had turned a corner. Heck, I told you they turned a corner. They're playing physical ball. They were beating up teams on both sides of the ball, and that's what they did. And then they went out in Denver and dominated for 3 quarters, and then nothing has been the same ever since. But here's what Jackson said, which I thought was very interesting in terms of this team and where they're at. And he said, I think we've got to be able to not just let things collapse. You know, good plays are going to happen for the other team. That's just the league that we play in. And we can't let one lead to another. I think that's just something we need to get better at. Like, we have to have the intensity, the focus as a whole team to weather the adversity storms and always just keep the belief that we're going to win. And I think at times we just let a few things lead to another instead of just shutting it down one play at a time. Pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, I think Jackson Dart speaks for an entire franchise that has gone 12 years pretty much unable to get out of its own way. The coaches change, the players change. Even if the players don't change, it's the same for the New York Giants. And now you have players who want to change that. And you listen to Jackson Dart, and I got to be honest, I believe Jackson Dart when he says, my confidence does not waver. But I also watched Jackson Dart in the postgame locker room. And we get in there after talking to Brian Dable, and, there's that underlying current right now that Dable's going to be fired, and Joe Shane's going to be fired, and Shane Bowen's going to be fired. And when is that going to happen? Is that going to happen yesterday? Is that going to happen today? Tomorrow? When is it going to happen? And the Giants are 2-7. So if it were to happen, you can't use the record to defend them. It is what it is. Now, I've told you all along, I believe that they will wait until January and then make a final determination as to who will be the general manager, who will be the head coach, and moving forward. So I don't believe any decisions have been made that the head coach or the general manager are not going to be here. But if you have to feel that and scream about that, that's on you. The bigger picture here is the fact that you have a quarterback. And I asked Brian Dable afterwards, and I truly believe this, are you wasting opportunities now, essentially, because now you have good quarterback play? Remember last year before the Giants won that game at the end of the year, and it was, if we had good quarterback play, this is what you need in this league. Now the Giants are getting high-level quarterback play. It's not perfect, but there are some plays that Jackson Dart makes that are elite plays. And I think the reality is that nothing else is going right. They're not playing complimentary football, but they're not complimenting Jackson Dart. And how do you fix that? Well, the defensive problems are one thing. They have to look at themselves in the mirror, and they have to be able to hold each other accountable. That experience this week with Dexter Lawrence and Carl Banks took on a different tone than I think really should have taken. The reality is that if you could lock up the legends of the Giants in a room with the current Giants defenders and have free conversations. Remember, how much was lauded in the preseason about all the Giants legends coming back and talking to the defense. Lawrence Taylor came back, Carl Banks, Michael Strahan, Justin Tuck. All these guys are talking to this defense about what's important. What's important now is that this defense gets in a room and is honest with itself. Because right now it's not where it needs to be. Are the injuries a problem? Absolutely. Not having Paulson Adebo and Cordell Flott and Javon Holland hurts the secondary. The secondary was up and down with them in the lineup. And now you're playing Tay Banks and Corey Black. It's a huge drop-off. Now, I'm not making any excuses for Tay Banks. I don't know what's happened to Tay Banks, the player that was here as a rookie that showed promise. I understand it's not in Wink Martindale's system. It's now in the system that last year for Shane Bowen was more zone than man-to-man and wasn't really press coverage and all that stuff. That's all a bunch of BS, to be honest. How does Tay Banks go from a football player that was able to contribute as a rookie and show positives in addition to negatives and go to now where you don't even want him on a football field? I was talking to Paul Wood before I came on, our producer, and the reality is you've got fans sitting in the stands saying anybody can be better than Tay Banks. I mean, what Brian Robinson did to Tay Banks today, Tay Banks should be embarrassed on that touchdown run. I mean, the Giants, at some point, you don't even want to put that on the screen tomorrow when you're going over this game because you have teammates laughing. And none of the teammates, maybe except for Brian Burns, has any grounds to be laughing at another teammate for getting embarrassed and punked on the field. Tay Banks was punked by Brian Robinson Jr. But the reality is this is a defense that is not playing all three levels together. And Brian Dable and Joe Shane and people in the organization need to look long and hard as to why that is. If it's the players and they are not listening to the coaches or the word or the messaging is not getting through, then if you want to make the change, then you fire Shane Bowen. I don't believe Shane Bowen is the only problem, and his schematics are the only problem. But if it's not getting through to the players, you can't change the players right now. I think Brian Dable is putting himself further in jeopardy as a head coach if he fires the defensive coordinator, especially if they don't respond afterwards, because he's already had his issues with a defensive coordinator after 2023 with Wink Martindale. Is that real or imagined? I'm not sure. I haven't talked to people in the organization. It's only my expectation is that if Brian Dable fires Shane Bowen, ownership is going to look at that and go, but now that's two defensive coordinators. Now, look, this happens. Established coaches go through defensive coordinators left and right. I mean, let's be honest. How many defensive coordinators did Tom Coughlin go through? We all know Spags, who won the Super Bowl in 2007. But before that, he had a defensive coordinator that failed. I think it was Sheridan. It was before my time on the beat. But I think the defensive coordinator that Coughlin had was – let me look. I want to look and see if I could find this because I thought it's important to. No, it was Tim Lewis. Tim Lewis was fired as defensive coordinator. So you had Tim Lewis as defensive coordinator for the Giants, and then in 2004, you had another defensive coordinator for the Giants. You know, so when you had Lewis, then you had Spagnuolo, then you brought Perry Fuel in. Perry Fuel got fired. You brought Spags back. So the reality is that, you know, Tom Coughlin went through defensive coordinators. The only difference, and it's a massive difference, is that Tom Coughlin won 2 Super Bowls. But it's not just going through coaches. It's the fact that when you make those moves, if you don't have that success, if you fire Shane Bowen and you don't have success, it's going to be you just fired a defensive coordinator as a scapegoat. All the stuff that happened with Wink Martindale was highly successful in 2022 with Brian Dable. In 2023, they were not successful. That defense was not good. Everybody forget the game in Dallas for the record of points. So the idea that, you know, they couldn't make it work. Well, Wink Martindale, the idea of Wink's defense of what it was versus what everyone's comparing it now to Shane Bowen, look, that falls at Brian Dable's feet. And the clip from Hard Knocks is going to play over and over again for Brian Dable when it was kind of that offshoot when he went to Joe Shane's office and said he was going to hire Shane Bowen, and then he read off the rushing defensive numbers. And I said last year when that aired, it was just a clip. It may have been one of those, let me just give them something, we'll put it on there and that kind of thing. But that will now come back because if you hired Shane Bowen for the defensive numbers, for the rushing defense, their rushing defense has been horrible. And it's not just the defensive front. Yes, the defensive front could be a lot better. But on the edges, the corners playing on the outside, you've got safeties filling gaps, not filling the right gaps. You got inside linebackers who might be looking in the backfield and not making plays. All of that matters. But again, I flip to the other side. And what you're getting from quarterback right now, Jackson Dart threw for, I believe it was 193 yards today. 191 yards. He was 24 of 33. He was sacked twice, threw for 2 touchdowns, and then ran for another 56 yards and rushed for a touchdown. This is great quarterback play from Jackson Dart. And if you're Giants fans, they are cheating you because you are so focused on who's going to be the next head coach and who is going to be the next general manager and when are we going to play fantasy football and how many draft picks are we going to have next year. And it's this endless losing cycle that you just can't break free of. You have to break free by attaching yourself to this quarterback. And that's why I keep talking about the trade deadline for Tuesday. And I know fans keep hammering me. And I know there's media people who disagree. This is what I believe. I believe the Giants need to go out and get a wide receiver that will be under contract for the remainder of this season and moving forward. If that's Jalen Waddle, I need to be told by the Miami Dolphins what it'll take to get Jalen Waddle here. Do I want to give the Miami Dolphins a first-round pick, which is what Adam Schefter reported this morning? No, I don't want to give them a first-round pick. But maybe, just maybe, if Champ Kelly, the interim GM, gets an offer from the Giants that says a second-round pick this year and then a 3 next year that may go down to a 2 depending on conditions and where things are, maybe Stephen Ross, the owner, says, you know what, make the deal. I need to know that. I need Joe Shane to be able to make those calls and know exactly what it's going to take to get Jalen Waddle. Chris Olave, Jacoby Myers. We saw today, Ray McLeod is not the answer. This Giants offense, look at what Jackson Dart is doing with this offense. Now, you can look one of 2 ways. You can say, look at what he's doing as a point guard. He's making everybody around him better. Sure, that's a job that he has to do. But you also have to look at this player and say, we need to give another player here. Let them work together. Let them build together. Let's go into next year with a wide receiver already. We don't know if Wan'Dale Robinson will be here. I'm not sure where Darius Slayton stands. Yes, you gave him the contract extension. That looks bad right now. But at the time when he got the contract extension, you thought it was going to get the average. Well, it was the going rate for wide receivers in this league at the time of his level. And Slayton has not helped his own cause. Dropped another touchdown today. Tough play. Got to make the play when it's in your hands. So I know I'm jumping around here. I'm trying to, even up some of the things that we've talked about. But Tuesday, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, maybe Jacoby Myers, Maybe someone else is available in Green Bay. Maybe the Colts will look to pair off A.D. Mitchell. Make a call to Jacksonville. Ask them about Brian Thomas. I'm guessing Brian Thomas Jr. is going nowhere now that Travis Hunter is injured. But the reality is that I need to exhaust all my opportunities here. I'm not holding on to draft assets for the future. The future is now. Jackson Dart is here. You have an offensive line that is doing a pretty good job, solid job. Make it happen, because you don't know when Malik Neighbors is going to be back next year. You do know you expect him to be back for the start of the season, but when is he going to start working out with Jackson Dart? When is Cam Scatterboot going to be able to be on the field working with Jackson Dart and this offense? You don't know. And I know there's this feeling that, well, you'll just wait until free agency. The quality player that I'm talking about is not available in free agency, and it's going to cost you so much more. Jalen Waddle is under a great contract right now if the Giants were to trade for him. So I would rather give up the draft capital and keep him at that contract rather than waiting to see who's on the market next year. Because more and more, as the cap continues to rise, these better players are not going to hit the market. So this idea of we'll wait till free agency, these guys may not go to free agency because someone else will make a play for them. And if Miami has an opportunity to trade him now, but let's just say they don't trade him now because no one meets his price, and then they get a new head coach down there in Miami, and all of a sudden they start turning it around next year and start winning games, well, then Jalen Waddle is not available anymore. I mean, that's just what happens in the NFL. If you don't strike when the iron is hot. And the other thing about the draft, it's an exact science. It's an inexact science that everyone wants to make it seem like it's just Joe Shane who fails on picks. There are a lot of wide receivers who are out there who just aren't stepping up that get drafted. And then look what happens. Guys get hurt. So it's not about worrying about the draft pick. We are such a community now that follows that we love the draft. Everything is about the draft. You got to get as many picks as you can. You got to do what you got to do. You got to do. If you don't turn those picks around in 2 to 3 years, people are already moving past. You know, again, draft classes for the Giants, 22, 23, 24. All of a sudden, people are already cashing in their chips. That's it. It's done. You can't build a team that way solely on just drafting because you don't have the time anymore to get guys ready to go. Are there instances where a great draft will build a team? Yeah. I think the Giants have had some pretty good drafts. But already I've said, people have thrown Tyler Newman out there and said he's a bust already. Guy's played 2 seasons, and he didn't even finish last year because he got hurt. Look back in Giants history. Go back and look to see players that turned out to be great players in this organization and how long it took them to truly develop into great players. But again, this is not reason or excuses to keep Joe Shane or to keep Brian Dable. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is right now you have a quarterback. Do what you can to act now. Don't wait. Because if you wait and then you lose time and then Jackson Dart regresses because you have no one out there on the field, and then you go into next year and you're wondering, how much am I going to do? Already I've heard, because people want to justify firing Brian Dable, that Jackson Dart is coach proof. It won't matter. He's really good. I don't know. I mean, you don't know. You don't know what Jackson Dart is without Brian Dable. Maybe Jackson Dart is great without Brian Dable. But then you play those games. You want to justify that you think Brian Dable should be fired because you don't like him as a head coach. And you look at his record and you say he's not a good head coach. Okay, fine. But then don't justify that by saying, see, look at Josh Allen. Look what he became without Brian Dable. Because we don't know if Brian Dable, if he wasn't in Buffalo, if Josh Allen would have ever become Josh Allen. Yes, he had the physical skills, but don't kid yourself. Go back to the development of Josh Allen. Dable was a big part of that. Now, can Jackson Dart be Josh Allen? And if Brian Dable leaves and they bring in a better, who they would consider a better head coach or a different offensive coach, there's no telling if Jackson Dart would succeed or fail. But I'm not there yet. Because once you go there, you welcome in uncertainty. Right now, we know who Jackson Dart is with Brian Dable. And again, I get it. You don't want to sacrifice the entire team just to keep a head coach who might be good for a quarterback. But again, nothing matters but the quarterback. If you have the quarterback, he is at the heart of every decision you make, especially on a rookie contract. So go make the calls. Go see if you can get a wide receiver in here on Tuesday. It's not about being 2-7. It's not about winning games because you're trying to save jobs. Yeah, it's all part of it. But the reality is Jackson Dart takes the field every week wanting to win. As an organization, why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't you embrace that? And I'm not saying go trade away a third-round pick for a receiver that is not under contract. I want a receiver who's under contract. I want a receiver who's going to be here at least through next year because I'm trying to build for the future now. I've got my future quarterback. I've got my present franchise quarterback. I want him here. I want to do everything I can to help Jackson Dart. And you're not helping Jackson Dart if you sit around and you're hoarding draft picks. Because as it did with Eli Manning, you didn't help Eli Manning with all the draft picks that you had and you made and failed. That's how they failed Eli Manning late in his career. You don't want to fail Jackson Dart before he even gets to be Eli Manning to the level of success that he has. So that's where that is. Tony from K-12 talking about effort from the defense in the second half or the lack of quality depth. Probably a little bit of both. You know, I think, as Jackson Dart said, and again, I'm going to be talking up Jackson Dart because I'm very impressed with what he's shown. Physically, mentally, everything he's done. You can't play in the NFL with the feeling of dread. If you're a fan in the stands or if you're in the press box like me and you're watching a game and you're saying, oh boy, here we go. If you're thinking that as a player, you've already lost. You've already given up that next big play. And I do think there is an element of that for this defense. Losing creates losing players. Winning creates winning players. Now, you can come in with a winning attitude, and that's what Jackson Dart has. And this was a beatdown today. What I saw in the locker room today, there were little glimpses of a beaten down quarterback. Now, Jackson Dart said his confidence has not wavered. It will not waver, and I believe it. But I think at this point, you are looking at you do not want to risk losing this quarterback. And there's no timetable for that. There's no easy timeline to look and say, well, we'll give him a couple years. He'll be fine. He'll be all right. Because I never want to look backwards and say I should have made that deal. And too many times the Giants are reactive, not proactive. And I know some of you are worried about, well, if Joe Schoen's a lame duck GM, first off, I don't believe he is, but that's a debate for another story, and we could debate it. But, well, Joe Schoen, they can't allow Joe Schoen to go trade draft picks. If he gets a good player, like he got Brian Burns, why isn't that a good trade? Why isn't that in the best interest of the New York Giants and the best interest of Jackson Dart? And if he's making deals based in that and not making a deal that's based in, well, I've got to do what's best for Joe Schoen, sometimes the flip side could be there too. You know, as a general manager, saving draft picks down the line, you go try to go get another job and you could say, look, I didn't deal that. I didn't deal that guy. I didn't deal this. I didn't deal that because I can be trusted as an organization. Joe Schoen is general manager to build this team, and he has a front office around him that is in the best interest of the New York Giants. And ownership trusts them to do that. I know they've missed on decisions. They've hit on decisions too. And the one decision they've hit on, and I believe it, you want to say, Art, it's only 6 starts. That's fine. But they hit on Jackson Dart. And it's a bunch of BS, the idea of, oh, Joe Schoen didn't want him. Remember, we saw on Giants Life, he didn't want him. He said Dable, he wanted to put it on Dable. It's Dable. You're going to see everything through a lens that you want to see. They both like Jackson Dart. They both wanted Jackson Dart. Of course, the head coach drove the decision. But do you ever think that maybe Joe Schoen wanted to make sure that his coach believed in him before he pulled the trigger and made a big trade like that, a big move, to talk it out? You don't think these conversations are had in front offices in the entire NFL? Remember, the day before, Joe Schoen had his son, Carson, out on Instagram, posted something about Jackson Dart, and everybody ran with it and said the Giants are going to take Jackson Dart. How'd that happen? Joe Schoen's daughter goes to Ole Miss. We found that out in the draft. You don't think Joe Schoen, as a general manager in the best interest of the Giants, wanted to make sure that everyone in the room knew that he wasn't just taking Jackson Dart because he had the most exposure to Jackson Dart, that you didn't see because Shedeur Sanders' family showed us all the videos of all the interactions between the Giants and Shedeur Sanders, but no one in Jackson Dart's family videoed the Giants at Ole Miss. Maybe that's why Joe Schoen talked to Brian Dable about how you're convicted, I'm convicted, this is the right guy, let's go make a trade for the quarterback. This wasn't moving up for Tay Banks. This wasn't moving up for Jalen Hyatt. So that's where we're at. Like I said, it's all about the quarterback right now. Every decision they make right now has to be about Jackson Dart, period. And what's so bad about bringing in a good player? I get it. Everyone talks about Leonard Williams and, oh, look, Gettleman got slammed by that. This is a different scenario. And I didn't slam them personally. You can go back and look. I didn't slam them for trading for Leonard Williams because I know what they tried to do. And part of that, yes, Gettleman was trying to save face at the trade deadline. But when you have a quarterback and you make a deal for a good player to come in here that's under contract for a quarterback, it's a no-win situation. It's a no-lose situation. Sorry, it is. So that's what's to keep up with it. I think there's a flip side to the trade deadline. Obviously, there are some Giants here who may be gone. Evan Neal, Jalen Hyatt certainly left the locker room today. I had the feeling that Jalen Hyatt believes he's going to be elsewhere. Does something happen with Tay Banks? I think the only way any of these guys are getting traded is if it's, the Giants give a 6th and Hyatt for a 5th, something like that. I would not trade Evan Neal unless someone comes with a strongish offer, early day 3 maybe. Because in one fell swoop, if you get injured up front, you're going to want to have Evan Neal there. Now, I don't know if Evan Neal, he's probably 4th in line to be there on the interior. You have Josh Azudu still on IR. You want to see maybe he gets back at some point. You have Aaron Stinney. Now JMS is hurt, so let's see what happens at center. I would imagine Austin Schlottman stays at center, but you never know if Greg Van Roten has to move. Now all of a sudden, who goes to right guard? Well, maybe that's Evan Neal's opportunity at some point later in the year. You don't want to give Evan Neal an opportunity to create a great scenario for himself, but if Evan Neal stays here through the year, he goes and signs a 1-year, $2 million deal in March, you're not going to get heat for it. If the Giants cut Evan Neal on Tuesday, it better be the right position for your team, the right thing to do for your team. Because if you go and you cut him or you trade him for a 7th-round pick, you're going to get blasted. Your record and resume is going to get blasted. And that is part of it. That's the best interest of the general manager, but also the best interest of the Giants. You keep talent. You see what happens. Because this team has certainly dealt with a lot from the opposite perspective. They let guys go, and every time a play is made, the Giants are reminded. No one talks about Azeez Ojulari, who's now on IR again in Philly, because you're going to be reminded about the players that you let go and excelled elsewhere. The MVP talk quiets down for Daniel Jones today. The Daniel Jones, the Giant, showed up in the Colts game today. 5 turnovers for Jones, 3 picks, 2 fumbles. Should have had a 6th turnover for a fumble that was recovered by the Colts. So, again, not slamming Daniel Jones, but let's let things play out here because the Colts haven't had that difficult of a schedule so far. But, again, every time Daniel Jones does something well, it's the Giants were idiots to let him go. And the Giants were also idiots for giving him $40 million a year. So you figure out how that works. It works in both ways. So that's where we're at. We'll see what happens with the trade deadline. If we end up having an emergency podcast, if anything happens, please stick again my plea for subscribe, digital subscription, northjersey.com. You can go do it. You should be able to get 6 months for $1. Hopefully we're worth $1. And we'll be following this team, continuing to go through it. 2-7, 7-2 doesn't change anything for me. Covering the team the way I do. So appreciate you being all in. We're out of here from MetLife. Thanks to Paul Wood. And always thank you, the all-in audience. We appreciate you watching and listening. And we'll be back this week as the Giants get ready for the Chicago Bears. Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson. Should be very interesting out there at Soldier Field to see what Giants team shows up. Because 3 straight losses, this team, it's beyond a gut check time. It'd be fun to watch Jackson Dart. I'm enjoying every moment to get a chance to watch this quarterback grow. I know Giants fans are too. So try not to let your speculation over the head coach and the GM and what's going to happen next get in the way of you enjoying at least a little bit having a franchise quarterback, because I do believe that at 22 years old, Jackson Dart is the franchise quarterback the Giants have been searching for since Eli Manning. Art Stapleton out from MetLife, and we'll talk to you guys this week.